I'll never forget that morning because honestly, it felt like something out of a bad action movie, except it was happening on my front lawn. Picture this. It's barely past 6 a.m. The sun's barely peeking over the rooftops, and I'm in my kitchen, coffee in hand, still wearing the same bathrobe I've had for years. All of a sudden, I hear boots. Heavy, tactical boots stomping down the street. I peek out my front window, and I swear my heart just about jumped out of my chest. There's a full-blown SWAT team surrounding my little two-bedroom house. Rifles, pointed straight at my rose bushes like I'm Pablo Escobar or something. Then this megaphone crackles and I hear, "This is the police. Come out with your hands up. We've had reports of a fortified compound on this property." A fortified compound. I almost spit coffee all over my robe. I'm standing there looking around my living room. Beige walls, second-hand couch, a couple of IKEA bookshelves. And I'm thinking, do they seriously have the right address? Turns out, yeah, they did. And the reason? My own HOA president. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name's Mark Jensen. I retired a couple years ago after 30-odd years in accounting. Figured I'd earn some peace and quiet, so I moved to this subdivision called Oak Hollow Estates. You know the type. Quiet cul-de-sacs, cookie-cutter lawns, and just enough HOA rules to keep the place looking like a postcard. Or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that I'd just signed up for life under the thumb of one woman, Brenda Holcomb, the HOA president. Now, Brenda, how do I even start? Imagine if Martha Stewart and a drill sergeant had a baby, and then that baby grew up convinced they were elected president of the United States instead of a suburban neighborhood association. She strutted around in yoga pants with a clipboard under one arm and a whistle around her neck, and she'd literally measure people's grass with a ruler every Thursday. Her poor husband never said a word, probably because Brenda said enough for the both of them. She had this way of turning even the tiniest inconvenience into a full-scale community crisis. One time she called an emergency board meeting because somebody left their Christmas lights up until January 2nd. I wish I was kidding. At first I just thought she was quirky, but then the fines started. $20 because my trash bin was still out at noon, even though the truck hadn't come yet. $50 because she claimed my mailbox leaned at an unsightly angle. Turns out it was leaning a whole 1 degree, if that. Then came the bird feeder debacle. I hung one up by my porch, and she wrote me up because, quote, undesirable wildlife might be attracted. When I told her birds aren't exactly dangerous, she shifted gears and said the seed shells were creating a slip hazard. Yeah, on my grass. It became this never-ending parade of nitpicking, but the real trouble started when I decided to do something I'd dreamed about for years. Plant a little vegetable garden. I went through all the proper channels, submitted, forms, even got the architectural committee to rubber stamp it. I thought that was the end of it. But Brenda was not about to let me enjoy a tomato without a fight. She'd stand at the edge of my yard with her measuring tape, claiming my tomato plants were too tall for community standards. She started emailing the whole neighborhood about my agricultural violations. She even climbed up to her second-floor window with binoculars, claimed she was bird watching, but funny how the only birds in her view were my cucumbers. When I rented a little trench digger to lay some PVC pipes for an irrigation system, that's when she went. Completely off the rails. To me, it was a one-day project so I wouldn't have to drag hoses around. To her, it was me digging military trenches. She told people I was preparing for a standoff with the government. No joke. I tried to reason with her. I literally showed her my Home Depot receipt and the sprinkler plans. She just narrowed her eyes and said, "That's exactly what someone hiding something would say." I started calling her Inspector Brenda in my head because she kept filing complaints, first with the city, then the county, then the State Environmental Board, saying I was disturbing wetlands in my dry backyard. Every inspector who came out shook their heads and left, but instead of backing off, Brenda doubled down. She roped in the treasurer by saying my digging might hit gas lines, convinced the secretary I was burying toxic waste, and whispered to the vice president. that I was probably building a bunker to dodge property taxes. None of it made a lick of sense, but she said it all with so much confidence that a few people started to believe her. Then one night, I'm sitting at my desk working late when I hear rustling outside. I flip on the backyard lights and there she is, Brenda, creeping through my garden with a flashlight and a clipboard, taking pictures of my trenches like she's on a CSI episode. I slide open the back door and say, "Brenda, what the hell are you doing on my property?" She whirls around and tells me she's conducting an emergency HOA inspection and that she has the authority to step foot anywhere she suspects violations. I laughed, couldn't help it, and told her to leave or I was calling the cops. She smirked and said, "I'll be the one calling them." And she stormed off. I figured she was bluffing, but oh man, I underestimated her. The very next day, a sheriff's deputy shows up. Brenda had filed a report claiming I threatened her and that my yard work was actually me fortifying a compound. The deputy looked around, saw my irrigation system, scratched his head and said, "Sir, I don't see anything illegal here, but you might want to get some cameras, just in case." That turned out to be the best advice I ever got. So I installed a security system with motion sensors and cloud storage, and within a week, boom, I had footage of Brenda sneaking into my yard 3 more times, twice in broad daylight while I was out, and once at 2 in the morning when she spent 20 minutes measuring my tomato stakes with a tape measure. Every clip went into a folder marked "Brenda Gone Wild." Now most of my neighbors thought she was being dramatic, but she was relentless. She told people I was some kind of sovereign citizen getting ready for a showdown. She whispered that I had threatened her, though the only thing I'd ever threatened was to call the cops if she didn't get out of my backyard. The rumor started spreading just enough that people gave me sideways looks, and then came the moment she crossed the line so far there was no coming back. She called 911 and reported that I'd built an armed compound in my backyard. She told the dispatcher I was anti-government, had been making threats, and then, this part still makes my stomach flip, she told them, "If he resists, shoot." Let that sink in. She literally instructed police to shoot me if I resisted. The dispatcher, thankfully, was professional, but protocol kicked in. That's why I had a SWAT team aiming rifles at my petunias at 6 in the morning. I walked outside in my robe, hands up, slippers flopping, trying to look as harmless as possible. "I'm Mark Jensen," I told the sergeant. "This is a mistake." He explained they'd gotten reports of a fortified compound. I actually laughed, which probably wasn't the best move considering the circumstances, but how else do you react when cops think your irrigation pipes are rocket launchers? I invited them to look around. The garden, the shed, the sprinkler, system. And within minutes, they realized they'd been duped. The sergeant looked furious, not at me, but at the fact that his entire team had been dragged out for a bogus call. When I mentioned Brenda, he sighed and said, "We'll be reviewing the 911 recording. You may want to press charges." So I did. Turns out the 911 tape was devastating. Her voice, crystal clear, saying, "Shoot if he resists." That alone turned what could have been a misdemeanor into something much more serious. I got myself an attorney and filed charges for harassment, trespassing, defamation, the works. My security footage sealed the deal, and once word spread, my neighbors finally started speaking up too. One guy admitted Brenda had hired a private investigator to follow him after he refused to trim his hedges. Another neighbor showed emails Brenda had forged, backdating violation notices to stack fines. We called an emergency HOA meeting. The place was packed, standing room only, everybody buzzing. Brenda waltzes in late, acting like she still runs the show, tries to call the meeting to order. But this time, the vice president, Tom, stands up and says, "Not today, Brenda." He announces a motion to remove her for gross misconduct. Brenda sneers and starts spinning the same story, that she was protecting the neighborhood from me, the dangerous compound builder. That's when I stood up, pulled out my phone, and hit play. The room went dead silent as her voice filled the hall. "If he resists, shoot." You could hear people gasp, One lady muttered, "Oh my God." Brenda's face drained of color. She tried to say it was edited, taken out of context, but nobody bought it. The vote to remove her was unanimous, except for her own vote against. But it didn't end with her losing her little kingdom. The district attorney filed charges. Brenda was arrested at her home 2 weeks later, kicking and screaming about her rights. Irony, right? The same woman who told cops to shoot me was now yelling about police harassment. She got convicted of filing a false police report and reckless endangerment, sentenced to 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay over 15 grand to cover the cost of the SWAT response. And because homeowners' insurance doesn't cover intentional acts, she had to pay everything out of pocket. Within